Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to Our Fantasy Game. I'm your host, the Game Master. And as of me recording this, it's Saturday, and we just got done playing a game session. And this was the first adventure in a new chapter in the game. We have done some other stuff in the past, and it is continuity. It for sure happened, but we're going in a new direction now. So the prologue to this story would basically just be a recap of the previous game session where they were on Earth, and Earth became what was basically a Shadowrun version of itself. And I'm referring to an old role playing game called Shadowrun, um, where it is very modern, but there are elves and orcs and stuff like that. There was a Will Smith movie on Netflix. I think it was called Bright. That was a very similar thing where he was like a cop in Los Angeles, but in this alternate world, his partner was an orc, right? That's more or less what we were doing. I ran a game that was supposed to be kind of an homage to Shaun of the Dead, where there was a zombie apocalypse started up in London, England. Um, but to make a long story short, the players didn't really like it. Some of them were having a hard time kind of wrapping their head around fantasy in a modern setting. And so we just decided that for now, the easiest thing for them would be to just do fantasy in a fantasy setting. And so when everybody went to Earth, they took a bunch of spelljammers with them, which are these fantasy chips, but they can go through space. And this particular spelljammer that we're using in this adventure, it really just looks like a normal ship from the Age of Sail, like basically a pirate ship, but it can fly. And so there's a handful of characters on this ship. It's all the PCs and NPCs from the previous game. One of them, by the way, is my wife is playing this character that the dad was a red dragon and the mom was an air maiden. And air maidens can be found in the old deities and demigods book from the 80s for D&D. And an air maiden is visually kind of like an angel or a Valkyrie, that kind of thing, where it's like a beautiful woman with blonde hair and blue eyes and these white feathery wings. Well, so the original pitch was she and this red dragon were going to have a child. And I said, wouldn't it be kind of cool if it got the dad's kind of red coloration and horns and the leathery wings and all that stuff, but it basically looks like a demon. And then people would assume it's a demon, and I was going to kind of draw on X-Men for inspiration and have the character be kind of like Nightcrawler. How Nightcrawler is not really a demon. He just had the misfortune of kind of looking like one. So people were always kind of out to get him, right? And so I thought that'd be kind of a cool idea to play around with. And the more we talked about it, the more my wife wasn't really feeling it. So we decided to invert that concept. And instead, we said, okay, so what if, in terms of bone structure and muscle and stuff like that, it's the shape of a dragon, right? But then for the outermost covering, let's take those white feathery wings and let's apply that idea to the character. So the entire thing is white and covered in feathers. And um, so because she was in the game and because she's just a hatchling, uh, she's about the size of an alligator. Um, I think from the tip of her nose to the tip of her tail, she's 8 feet long, is what the book said. Um, so because she's so young, we decided that it wouldn't really make a lot of sense for her to be too far away from her mom. So the mom has now kind of joined the party, and the mom is like a high level veteran hero from our last campaign. And we have videos on the channel about that. If you're curious about that, you can check those out. But so she is on this ship. And she's not going with the party when they go out adventuring so much. She's keeping the ship itself safe so nobody steals it, so on and so forth. Because, like I said, she's a very high level character from our last campaign. Um, but so in Spelljammer, one of the ideas is that you only have so much air on a ship before you run out. So you need to be really careful where you're going. You get there in time so that once you get there, you can get air from that place, right? And then the other thing is Spelljammer is really big into how much food did you bring with you? And you need to be really mindful of that, right? That you can only travel so far. It really limits you, and you really need to think things through, right, to survive in a Spelljammer campaign. So we said then that, last game things went bad on Earth. So in this game, they have now left Earth and they arrive at this thing that I will refer to as a space station. And what it is there are elves in Spelljammer that are kind of based on the British from the Age of Sail. And so they wear like a captain's jacket. They have sort of these British Armada inspired uniforms. And these elves have this air of superiority and they're very haughty and so on and so forth, right? And they have this ship called an Elven Armada that is kind of like their answer to an aircraft carrier. The whole thing is grown using this kind of like tree based technology. And so one of the things they do is they will take old Elven Armadas and kind of dock them so that the front of the ship is touching another front of a ship. So if you're looking down on it from the top, it's shaped like a star, right? And then the idea is these tree roots or branches or whatever you want to call them will slowly start to intertwine with the roots and branches and stuff of these other ships. And so they fuse together and they form these sort of gigantic um space stations, kind of like star-shaped space stations. And so that was the setting for this one. And we had said that this was a relic of this war that happened in the past, where this particular space station had been boarded by a race of space orcs, which are called the Scro, SCRO. Um, and they had kind of wiped out all of the elves on this station and they, took stuff and then they had moved on. Now, this place is sort of a generic space station where all sorts of different races are here. And so when the party they have their ship dock at the space station, and when they disembark, there is this um, cat person who works on the docks, and he sees them and he thinks they look interesting. They don't look like the ordinary adventuring party because, like I said, they have this feathery dragon baby with them, right? One of the other guys, by the way, is a huge werebear, and he's just walking around in his bear mode, the hybrid form, where he's like really, really tall. And he's built like the Incredible Hulk, and he's covered in brown fur, and then his muzzle area is tan colored. So in terms of coloration, think of like your traditional teddy bear, right? And then he's more or less dressed like Conan the Barbarian, and on his chest he has this scar where his name is Maddock. And in our old games, he actually was assassinated at one point. The party had resurrected him. It's a long story. Again, it's in those old adventures. When we were doing stuff recently on Earth with the undead, we said that Maddock was fighting various undead critters from Dungeons and Dragons that can drain levels. And that's from classic D&D, right? So even though he had adventured on Earth for years and years and years, and he had leveled up and so on and so forth, the Maddock that we see in this game session has been reduced to being a level 1 character again. So he is where you want him to be to join an adventuring party, right? With him is Kaja. Kaja is another bear. She's not a werebear. She's just like a huge bear. We had this game way back when where they had to fight the goddess of magic. And in that game, this goddess had claimed that all magic everywhere actually came from her. And it's a really long story, but they fought her. And we did that so long ago, we were still using the old school D&D rules where whoever gets the kill gets all of the experience and stuff like that, right? And so I can't remember what character my wife was playing now, but Kaja was like her companion animal. And so she would get to go, but then her bear companion would get to go. And we'd roll for the bear to do like a claw bite kind of thing. And so this bear actually landed the killing blow and not only got all of this crazy levels of experience for doing this, right? And this was like the climax of an entire campaign. Not only did the bear get all of those experience points, but it absorbed that magic. And so the irony is Kaja now sort of like possesses all the magic. She's this crazy cosmic insanely powerful bear thing, right? But here's the thing is but she's a bear. She can't talk, right? And she doesn't have fingers to make gestures or whatever with her hands, so she can't cast spells. You know what I mean? And so she is hanging around with Maddock because Maddock has this thing on his character sheet, which basically means that bears really like him. It's a werebear thing. And so um he's riding Kaja around, and Kaja goes over when they go into the bazaar. And it's sort of like a flea market in space with all these weird fantasy races selling various things. Like we mentioned, there were dark dwarves, and they were selling stuff that they'd made out of this black metal. It was like black chrome. And it was all masterwork hammers and stuff like that. But so it's this very exotic marketplace. And um so there was this one guy, and he was like, not only was he chaotic evil, it was super obvious that he was chaotic evil. And so she went over to the guy and starts eating his magic items. And he was trying to cast, some kind of a spell on her, and then nothing was working because she's like the embodiment of all magic. Um, so she was debating just eating him. And so Maddox goes over and rolls, and we use charisma based skills and stuff. But he basically says, "Look, I can't really do that much. Whether she just has a mind of her own. If I were you, I would just stop attacking her and get away with your life, basically." And so this guy was very disgruntled and unhappy about it, but he still did it. He still just kind of backed off. But they went to this other part of the space station that had this room, and I got the idea from the Dark Crystal, where they have this huge room. I think the character's name is Augra, and it's like her planetarium or something, but it's like it's this steampunk machine that shows where all the planets are. It shows whether it's day or night on each one of those planets. It shows, where is the moon in terms of, that planet's moons and their orbit. But the idea was that spelljammers would go to a place like this to look at the positions of where everything is at to figure out where they're going next, to make sure they have enough provisions they can survive the distance. And so when you are flying to the next planet, of course, you're not flying to where it is at now. You have to figure out where it is going to be by the time you get there. And that is the course you have to lay out, right? Hopefully that all makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, say something in the comments section and I'll try to do a better job of explaining it. But so he's there figuring that out. While he's doing that, back in the marketplace, this tabaxi male monk catfolk guy, named Jabbar is no, I'm sorry, Juban. His name's Juban. My bad. He was played by Brad. He's a monk. He had been working as a dock worker. He's really sick of living in space. Um, he really wants to be somewhere where he can just basically lay in a sunbeam. And there's no sun here, right? It is always night on this space station, and he's sick of it. And so he in his whole deal, by the way Brad described it was Brad has like a certain kind of a sense of humor. And so he wants this particular character to act like an actual cat, right? Where, he's going to sit in boxes and knock stuff off of counters and stuff like that. And I said, that's fine. Whether that is normally how Tabaxi would act or not, since this is a space situation we find ourselves in, we can just say you're from some world somewhere where that is how those Tabaxi act, right? So, so at any rate, he, like the feathery dragon, which we gave her the nickname Crocodile, cock as in a rooster, because she interacted with, there was a hippo man, like a hippopotamus person, um, who was sort of like a big game hunter. He was talking to her at one point and was referring to her, like, what a strange chicken you are. Um, and so that's where kind of the crocodile joke came from. That she's about the same size as a crocodile in terms of her length, and she's not very high up off the ground, that kind of thing. She's moving around on all fours. She's not walking on her hind legs like a person. She talks because she's a dragon, but she's still, you see what I'm saying? More kind of animal in terms of her appearance. So they started referring to her as the crocodile. Her real name is Tara, but right now we're calling her Crocodile. And then the other member of the party is Flit. Flit is a pixie who is a rogue, but he is a liar and he keeps telling everybody he's a paladin. Um, so at any rate, the cat person meets the other PCs, wants to join the party, and they're kind of like just they spend the whole time arguing. And the people who are already in the party, what they were supposed to be doing was getting supplies. They were supposed to go get food for the trip, so on and so forth. We also said the ship had to fill up with fresh air. We said that since this place is made out of trees, this place produces air. So they were able to do that. They were able to exchange air. And of course, the air that the people have been, it's basically their breath is all that was left on the ship, right? So of course that's good for the trees. And then of course the fresh air that the trees put out is good for the people. So they're swapping the air elsewhere. The NPCs are. But yeah, these guys, the pixie and the crocodile, were supposed to go get food. And so Maddox comes back with Kaja, and they haven't done that at all. And he's like, what are you guys doing? And then the cat guy is like, I want to join the party. And but the cat guy was batting at a feather on this hat that the crocodile stole from a couple of pirates that were passed out against a wall, and they had like empty bottles of rum in their lap. And so she had stolen one of their pirate hats, thinking that was a funny prank or whatever. And she had killed this bird previously and had this feather from this bird thing that she then stuck in her pirate hat. And the cat guy was batting at this feather like it was a cat toy. And so Maddox shows up and he's more serious, and so he's not really nuts about any of this, right? And so the crocodile is like, this guy won't leave my feather alone. And then the cat person just lies to Maddox and says, well, I didn't touch the feather. And so Maddox votes against this person joining the party, right? He's like, well, if you're going to lie to my face, I really don't want to have anything to do with you, you know? Um, and so then the pixie, who was lying and saying that he's a paladin, says, well, I just cast detect evil, and like, nah, the cat guy's fine. I vote that he joins. And so then of course that's a tie. They need a tiebreaker. And so the crocodile is like, if you apologize for screwing with my feather in my hat, then I'll vote you into the party. And eventually he does. So she votes yay. Maddox is outvoted. He's like, fine, whatever. I'm going to go get the provisions since you guys refuse, basically, and I'll meet you back on the ship. So he does. They go back on the ship and they, set sail, so to speak. And so they go to this planet. And when they get there, there is this girl who she was in the last game too. She's basically a first level mage, in the most generic of senses. But she can sense something out of the ordinary on this planet. And what it is this is based on the first published D&D adventure ever. And there's this frog themed temple in a swamp. The PCs don't know that yet, but I'm just setting this up for you, the listener. And in the temple is this very exotic object. In fact, it is so exotic that it can be sensed from afar. So she says that. And so they bring the ship in low and it's nighttime. So the irony is, from the point of view of the primitive medieval society on this planet, the Spelljammer seems kind of like a UFO, right? But they come in low over this tiny little village in the middle of nowhere with no lights at all. And because the way a Spelljammer works is like the deck of the ship, they have this thing called a gravity plane. And so what that means is no matter what angle the ship is at in the sky, you can walk on the deck as though the ship was right side up, right? So they literally invert the ship. They turn it like a barrel roll so that they can look up at the ground. Does that make sense? Because the ship's upside down. So when the people on the deck look straight up, they're actually looking at the ground below the ship. And so they bring it in really, really low so that the ship has masts and sails and stuff like that. And the ship basically sails through like the main dirt road that this town is on. And the main road goes perfectly north and south. So they kind of bring it in low over the town square, which is a crossroads. And again, the from that center of town, the roads there, the main one goes north and south, and then there's a slightly smaller road that goes east and west. And west of the town square, it goes down a hill, and there's a river down there that the water in the river goes from north to south. And south of the town is a big swamp. That's where the temple is, the Temple of the Frog. Um, so that's where they're headed. It's where they haven't gone yet. And then if you go west out of town, the road goes up and it gets more hilly. And the further out that way you go, it's a little mountainous. Well, so they go north from the town square, and right at the edge of town, there's a school, is like the last thing out there on the left hand side. And then beyond that is just like fields and farms and stuff like that. So they turn the ship right side up, and then they basically hide it behind this school. And the NPCs stay on the ship and guard it. They have a life helm that makes this ship work. The life helm and Spelljammer, you really kind of want a character in it that has regeneration. So, like, we used to have various troll NPCs, and we would use them. And so they would be the power source that makes the ship work. But by the time you get to where you're going, they are very tired, right? They're really worn down. So they put the werebear Maddock. He was sort of the power source. So by the time they get to the planet, he doesn't want to go adventuring with the rest of the party. He needs to rest. So he doesn't leave the ship. He stays behind. Basically, everybody stays behind except for Flit the Pixie, um, the Crocodile, Tara, and the cat guy, right? Juban. So they start to look around at these houses. They realize the town has been ransacked. Uh, Stuff has been left behind, but the people seem like they were drug out of their houses at some point. And based on how high the grass is, based on how moldy various bits of food are that they find, they conclude that it seems like it's a very small village, but it seems like everybody in the village was just like kidnapped about a month earlier. And at first, they do a lot of sneaking around and there's a lot of stealth and stuff like that. But the more they move around through the town and don't find anything, the less stealthy they are until eventually they are just floating their spelljammer right down Main Street, close to the ground, as if they were having a parade, honestly. Going from north to south, they go through town. Just south of the town is a cemetery. They're looking around to see if the dead, if like zombies came up out of their graves or whatever, because since that sort of stuff was happening in the last game, I guess it was fresh in their minds. But no, that's, not the case here. They go further south of town, so they're basically a mile south of the village, and there's this farm. And so right, like, there's two levels of ground, so that the farmhouse is built on the higher level. And then behind the farmhouse, there's a hill that goes north, and there's a hill that goes west, right? And and so the what the farmhouse is on top of would almost be shaped kind of like a pyramid if you cut the tip of it off and you just had a farmhouse up there, right? But then the pyramid itself is grassy. Does that make sense? At any rate, so where it would basically be northwest of the farmhouse is where this massive swamp begins. So they end up setting the spelljammer down in the swamp there, because when it's not flying, when you don't want it expending energy, right? It is designed to float. So they put it in the water. The crocodile dives into the water at one point to swim around in it. And I make my wife, who's playing that character, make a saving throw using her constitution. And she makes her throw. So I say, okay, you don't take a point of damage or anything like that, but you feel queasy. You just feel kind of nauseous. There's something wrong with this water. And I said that, the vibe you should be getting, the feel of this place is kind of Lovecraftian, right? So she gets out of the water and, washes off. There was like a water thing in front of the house where you pump it like a spigot and water comes out. So, one of the characters is pumping and she's rolling around underneath it trying to get this sort of vague smell of death from this swamp, like out of her feathers. They go, and then a bunch of the NPCs go in the farmhouse, and they're turning this farmhouse into sort of a temporary base of operations. And all of the clues here, I said the people in the town look like they were kidnapped a month ago, or abducted, or whatever you want to call it. The people in the farmhouse have been missing longer than that. Their food is more rotted than the food in town was, so on and so forth. And so the PCs assume, well, the farmhouse is right here next to the swamp, so they must have gotten them first. Whoever they are, they must be in the swamp, and they got the farmer and his family first. So they turn the farmhouse into kind of a base of operations. Maddock, the werebear, sleeps. He's taking a long rest. So the PCs that I mentioned earlier are the ones who then get a lifeboat off of the Spelljammer, put it in the swamp, and they go out. And so I start to run the module, Temple of the Frog, part one. And the first thing that they encounter are four large crocodiles. So we roll initiative, and Flit the pixie goes first. He flies up in the air. He turns invisible. He's shooting his tiny, crappy little arrows. And spoiler, he never hits one. All we managed to do in terms of combat was fight these crocodiles, and that was it, right? Large crocodiles. He didn't hit a single one all game long, right? Every time it was his turn, he just shot at one. Every time he missed. They had an armor class of 17. So, it comes around to then Brad was the second to go. So his cat guy uh, tries to attack, fails. So then we go to my wife. And so the dragon thing that she's playing, the crocodile, has a breath weapon that is fire, since her dad was a red dragon. So she functions um like a red dragon hatchling, basically, is pretty much her base stats. And then we modify that with a template that references the mom. And by the way, we said she has a twin sister, and her name is Karma. And in the case of the sister, it's flip flop, like I said earlier, where she basically looks like a young succubus, or whatever. You get the idea. But she's an NPC. She's not really doing anything right now. She's with the mom, you know, back at the base. Also, point being, Tara, the crocodile, has a fire breath weapon. So she uses that, and it takes each one of the large crocodiles has 24 hit points. She manages to get all four of them in her cone of where on the map she can affect. And so three of them fail their saving throw, and their hit points drop to 7 each. One of them makes his saving throw, and he still has 16 hit points, right? So then, at the end of that turn, the crocodiles enter the boat. They get into the lifeboat with the PCs. And then they try to attack PCs, and they fail all of their rolls. So we go back to the top of the order. Flit the pixie attacks, misses. Brad's cat guy attacks, misses. Or no, I'm sorry, he doesn't attack. He steers the boat to where there's some trees, and then his plan is next turn, once he's at the trees, he wants to climb the trees to get out of the reach of the crocodiles, and he wants to try to use ranged attacks to take them out. But so for right now, he's just getting the boat over there. On my wife's turn, she manages to kill one. She does a claw bite. So she kills one of the crocodiles. The remaining three attack and don't hit, don't do any good. On round 3, they get to the trees. The pixie is still flying in the air, invisible. He's still shooting and missing. Brad's character, the cat, climbs up a tree, throws a dart, and actually does take one of them from 7 hit points down to 3 hit points. And then on the my wife's turn, she rolls a d6, and on a 5 or a 6, her breath weapon has recharged and is ready to go again. So she rolls a 6. She's got the breath weapon back. She uses it, and she kills all three of them then. And so that was the end of that fight. So they go back in the epilogue to this adventure. They go back to the farmhouse, drag the boat up, onto land out of the water. They've got one of these crocodiles, and they cut its belly open, and its belly is full of these weird worms. And it was really just kind of that, that's not in the module at all. I just added that. We try to listen to music that kind of sets the tone for the game. The soundtrack my son chose was actually the soundtrack track to Night of the Creeps, which is my favorite horror movie of all time. And I suppose maybe subconsciously in the back of my head, I was thinking about how the creeps are these worm-like things, and they get in your brain and they control the host. And I just was trying to say, like, I wanted the swamp itself to feel dangerous. I wanted the water to feel dangerous. I didn't want them to feel like this is no big deal. The whole time I just wanted them on like high alert. So I came up with this idea, kind of a body horror kind of thing, for the alligator's belly is just full of these worms. And I thought that's kind of neat. It's parasitic and it's gross, and that's cool. And so of course now they're wondering if worms are getting into the heads of people and controlling them, and you know what I mean? So I like that. I kind of like the paranoia of it. Um the dragon, the crocodile, she ends up using a breath weapon again and cremates the body of this crocodile they brought up on shore, because they were just going to put it out in the water, and then they realized they really didn't want those worms getting loose. um so yeah, they cremate the body. Everybody takes a long rest. This whole adventure, as far as the stuff that took place on the planet, it all took place at night. um So they sort of said to themselves, they feel like it's worse going out at night. They want to go out by day. Um, so yeah, we can't play next week because actually next week I'm going to be at a comic book convention. I'm a guest of honor there for my other game that I run. I run the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. And so I'm going to be probably running that at the convention. The one guy who's promoting the convention got confused and said they're going to have D&D there, referring to what I do as D&D, even though I play D&D about 1% of the time. The other 99% of the time I play DC Heroes. So I don't know what we're going to do at the convention. If people really want to play D&D, I might actually run this there. I don't know. But as far as planning on doing this here at my house next week, that for sure is not going to happen. So, yeah, that's it. That's it for me for this one. Um, Hopefully, you guys enjoyed hearing this. If so, we would love it if you were to smash like, make sure you're subscribed, and leave us a comment. And from all of us here at our fantasy game, we hope you have a good one, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Bye.